going to air it out down the field. A catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Week 8 coming up here in this 2021 season. And the way we are looking at Week 8 this week, it's interesting. It's not quite the big loaded week with these high-profile matchups, these top 10 matchups, these tremendous rivalry conference clashes even before rivalry week. We're not quite there yet. This is essentially our warm-up week because we did have a lot of bye weeks last week. And speaking of bye weeks, of course, my Rutgers Scarlet Knights desperately needed one this week, so they're off. So we won't even have to mention my good old Scarlet Knights here this morning as well. So we're going to dive into our 5-pack of picks later in the show, break down some of the other games as well. 24-11 on the season through the first 7 weeks, and this is after a 2-3 weekend last week where we actually struggled a little bit. First time all year we actually were below 500 on a weekend. We lost the Rutgers game, lost the Auburn-Arkansas game. Pitt, Virginia Tech let us down, but we rebounded with Ole Miss over Tennessee and UCLA over Washington to boot. So we finished strong. Unfortunately, did not start out well enough, and we lost a bit of money last week, but still 24-11 on the season through the first 35 games, which I find myself be pretty impressed with myself. But we're going to start today with I guess you can call it interesting now, but it begs the question of what's going to happen down the line with this school and with these two quarterbacks, and that's at Oklahoma. So Caleb Williams got his first career start last week against TCU, and he dominated. He dominated. It wasn't even close. He pretty much did what Oklahoma quarterbacks are supposed to do in Lincoln Riley's offense, which is throw the ball very efficiently, high completion percentage, lots of yards, lots of scores, and to boot, Caleb Williams, who again is only a freshman, he can run the football as well. That's something Spencer Rattler really did not do often and really barely did at all. And if you look at all the quarterbacks Lincoln Riley has had, going back to Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, then you come into Rattler, the one thing he didn't have was that rushing ability. Now, again, the 3 quarterbacks he had prior to Rattler were not homegrown talents. They were transfers. Baker Mayfield coming in from Texas Tech. Obviously, you have Kyler Murray coming from Texas as well. So you look at where these guys were, and then, of course, Jalen Hurts coming from Alabama. Rattler's was the homegrown guy, and everyone's thinking to themselves, all right, he picked it up last season. Kyler Murray, Texas A&M. Wanted to correct myself there. So when you look at Spencer Rattler, everyone's thinking to themselves, all right, Lincoln Riley, because he's so good at being a quarterback whisperer, he's going to turn Rattler into probably the best quarterback he's ever had, but he's going to have him for more than 1 year. Now, granted, last year he was a redshirt freshman, so he did not have big game experience prior to that, and they got off to that 1 and 2 start last year. But Rattler finished the season very well, very hot. They won, 8 in a row or 7 in a row to finish 8-2, 9-2 last year. So they finished the proper way in 2020. Won a bowl game as well, and they won the Big 12 again for the 6th straight time. Fast forward to 2021, it just hasn't been breaking right for Spencer Rattler. And because he didn't take the next step, he was the preseason favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. He also was a projected number 1 overall pick based on his trajectory. And when that happens, and he falls under pressure, Now, did he exactly fold under pressure? Not exactly, because he didn't play horrible, but he also didn't play up to snuff where he should have played. Look, Rattler's best game this year was against Western Carolina or somebody. They won 76-0. Okay, he threw 5 touchdowns. And he was very efficient. passing-wise, but against Tulane, the season opener, due to the storms back in early September, that game got moved to Norman. So they had this game at home. They barely won that game. Now, he threw for over 300 yards. His completion percentage was at 77 for that game, but he threw 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and then he follows it up with his 5-touchdown game. All right, he's back, but against a lower quality opponent, we'll say. Against Nebraska, all right, efficient, 214 yards, 24 of 34, touchdown. All right, no turnovers. West Virginia, that's the game even at home. They win 16-13, and you're starting to worry about Oklahoma because he was 26 of 36, only 256, a touchdown and a pick. That's even then, and that's not a terrible game. It's just not a game that should be that's Oklahoma standard. Oklahoma, based on the last 4 years at least, Oklahoma fans were chanting for the freshman Caleb Williams then, and this guy has already subbed in before in small packages and has run wild with the football. They were calling for him then. And then against Kansas State, all right, he goes 22 of 25. Great. 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Still, they barely scraped by Kansas State, 37-31. Now, granted, Kansas State has given Oklahoma lots of problems. And then you go to 2 weeks ago at home against Texas not at home, I beg your pardon. The Red River Showdown against Texas. This is the game that these two schools circle on the calendar every single year. Now, they were getting smoked, absolutely smoked. He's 8 of 15, 111 yards, and an interception. He finally gets pulled for Caleb Williams. And what does Caleb Williams do? Well, he goes off and leads them to an epic comeback victory. And then Rattler didn't even play 1 snap against TCU last week. Just goes to show you. You have to play the hot hand, and now what Caleb Williams has done, he has already cemented his spot. Unless he falls off a cliff here, Caleb Williams is going to be your starting quarterback for the rest of the year for Oklahoma, and then he's going to be the starting quarterback the next year and probably the next year. Because again, he's a true freshman, so he has to play He's got to play at least 3 years before he can become NFL draft eligible. So the way this guy's playing, he's Oklahoma's quarterback for the next 3 seasons, which includes this one. And Rattler's gone. I can't see Rattler, and I know I talked about this last week, but Rattler is gone. There's no way he can stay in this program after this season. I never expect him to transfer midseason, but he is not going to stay here post-2021. And Williams last week was 18 of 23, 295 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had 66 rushing yards, and he also had a rushing touchdown on the ground. And if you look at his overall season, he hasn't thrown the ball too much aside from his first start last week, but he's 40 of 59, 609, 6 touchdowns, 215 yards on the ground, and he's got 3 touchdowns on the ground as well. So, he is clearly the better option, and some people are already saying that he could be in the Heisman conversation already. Now, I find that a little hard to believe since we are already 7 games into the season. He had to, be absolutely absurd over the last 5 games, win the Big 12 as well. So you're talking about 6 more games, hypothetically, for Caleb Williams to put on a Heisman resume out there compared to other players, which is led by Matt Corral and Bryce Young. If you want to talk about quarterbacks, and you throw running backs like Bijan Robinson, or Kenneth Walker, or Trevion Henderson over at Ohio State. Plus, hey, quarterback C.J. Stroud over at Ohio State. He's in the running for the Heisman as well. So the way I look at it, I don't think he's not. He might have a late push, but he's not going to be invited to New York. He would have to do something absolutely absurd if he was going to be invited to New York for the Heisman. But he's clearly the better option, and the way this weighs out, this actually affects the rest of college football. Because if you kept Spencer Rattler in there for Oklahoma, this team was doomed. They were absolutely doomed to lose a game at some point. They would have lost against Texas, and right there, Texas would have had a huge win. They would have shaken up the rankings within the top 25. The Big 12 would have been affected, and Oklahoma State would have been the best team in the Big 12 to that point. So the way I look at it now, you have Georgia 1, Cincinnati 2, Oklahoma is 3. They actually moved up a spot after last week. Alabama's 4, Ohio State's 5, Michigan 6, Penn State 7, Oklahoma State 8, Michigan State 9, and Oregon 10. And of course, this big shift happened because of Iowa's loss. They dropped from 2 to 11. And then Ole Miss round up the top 12, was they are number 12 coming into this week. So Oklahoma just kept their playoff hopes alive. They kept their Big 12 championship hopes alive because if you look at Rattler, they would have lost to Texas, and heck, I don't know if they would have beaten TCU if Rattler was still starting. But again, if they had lost to Texas and he was starting, Williams might have played against TCU and caused a little bit of a rebound victory there. So Oklahoma's quarterback situation, it's Williams for the future, it's for the present and the future. Spencer Rattler is going, and this causes the ripple effect I was talking about. It keeps Oklahoma a legitimate playoff team. Keeps them as a legitimate playoff team. Because you never know. Cincinnati could fall at some point. They could. I don't think they will because they do have an easier schedule. They do have SMU later in the year, which SMU is ranked, and they did dominate as well on Thursday to keep themselves undefeated. They're ranked number 21, so that'll be a booster for Cincinnati, but I do see them winning out. Georgia's probably going to win out unless they have a rematch with Alabama, or sorry, not a rematch with Alabama, but they play Alabama in the SEC title game, and that might be a loss. Who knows? Maybe they lose to rival Florida, but I don't see that as well. And then of course Alabama's right there. They either going to get knocked out by Georgia or they're both going to get in. So now it's a very tight-knit group right there, and you can't forget about Ohio State and Michigan. But now Oklahoma has kind of closed the door a little bit by going to Caleb Williams. They've closed the door to Ohio State, and just based on the situations that I just mentioned, Georgia and Alabama could both get in. Cincinnati, as long as they run the table, they might get in. And then Oklahoma, again, you know what they have to do. They win the Big 12 and they're undefeated. They are obviously getting in. So what does that do for other one-loss teams like Ohio State and Penn State, plus Michigan? But again, all these teams have to play each other. Oklahoma State is in the running now because they're undefeated halfway through the year, but they'll have to take on Oklahoma. Michigan State, again, same thing, 7-0. That's why it's so early to tell, and you can't really project it. But the way things are shaping out right now, you could easily see those top four teams just running the table for the rest of the year. Except, let's just say Georgia is 12-0, but they lose to Bama in the title game, and Bama's 12-1, so they're both 12-1, right? Bama and Georgia probably both get in. Cincinnati and Oklahoma are undefeated; they're probably going to get in, and then you're going to leave out, maybe a one-loss Big Ten champion. A one-loss Big Ten champion, or an undefeated Big Ten champion. In the case of Ohio State, they might take out the loser of the SEC title game, or an undefeated Big Ten champion, a la Michigan or Michigan State, does get into the playoff over a one-loss non-conference champion as well. Or they just knock out Cincinnati. It's the way it works. But Oklahoma has limited the options of the college football playoff with their decision to go to Caleb Williams. And, they play Kansas today. They're going to likely dominate because Kansas is obviously a joke right now. He's going to dominate. It's as simple as that. But you could see how, for the team, Oklahoma is now back to where everyone thought they were going to be, but they have a different quarterback. And with Rattler, he's going to be gone. And it's amazing how he just goes from projected number one overall pick, preseason Heisman favorite, to now he's going to be maybe some sort of role player. Remember, he threw a 2-point conversion completion against Texas a couple weeks ago, but he didn't play at all last week. So unless they're going to be, blowing out teams 45-0 by the fourth quarter, he's not getting in. This is the Caleb Williams show, and Spencer Rattler's probably going to have to go somewhere else next year to get his draft stock back up, because right now I would not even sniff him in the first round, maybe not even the second round, the way he has played over the last, a year and a half, let's just say. So Caleb Williams, huge domino effect as we, move forward here into the second half of the season. And another thing I wanted to mention, and it does stem from the Big 12, the Big 10. It's just a loaded conference right now. But it remains to be seen how this is going to shake out, because we don't get these, and I mentioned at the top of the show, we don't have these huge matchups this week. We have to wait basically another week. For example, Ohio State's at Indiana this week, tonight actually at 7:30, but then they play Penn State at home next Saturday night. Michigan plays Northwestern today. Michigan State's on a bye. Those two play each other next week. So, yeah, we'll have a huge preview of all these games next week. But the Big Ten is very interesting because you don't want this to be the week where teams overlook one another, do you? I don't think that's going to happen in these two scenarios. I mean, I would think Michigan and Ohio State are going to dominate their respective opponents. And then you got Ohio State versus Penn State, and then you got Michigan versus Michigan State. That's not it. That's not the end of it because Ohio State has yet to play Michigan State as well. Michigan has yet to play Penn State, and of course, Ohio State and Michigan play each other during the final game of the season. So we're about to hit the gauntlet. You know, the last weekend of October, and then, of course, the whole November slate. I mean, look at Ohio State's November schedule right now. So they have Indiana tonight, they have Penn State next week. All right, now you have their November schedule. At Nebraska, home against a currently number 25 ranked Purdue. Home against Michigan State, at Michigan. And Michigan State and Michigan are both top 10 teams right now. That's a gauntlet right now. I don't care who you are. And they may be back to where they're supposed to be, Ohio State, but that is a very, very tough schedule. As that you have to play 3 top 10 teams and 4 ranked teams in your last 6 games. Second half of the season, you have 4 ranked opponents and 3 of them are in the top 10. I don't care who you are. That is a tough, tough schedule. So this really begs the question, who's coming out of this mess? Because if you look over in the Big Ten West, Iowa losing opens up the door for a lot of teams. And I'm talking about Minnesota all of a sudden controls their destiny. So does Purdue. Because Purdue's the one who beat Iowa. Iowa's 3-1 right now. But, of course, Purdue has the tiebreaker. Minnesota has yet to play Iowa. Heck, you can't even consider them out of it yet. Because, I mean, if Iowa's capable of losing that game, they could lose another one. So Northwestern and Wisconsin are not technically out of it yet. Now, Illinois and Nebraska, way out of it. Now, would I expect Northwestern or Wisconsin to go on some sort of run for the rest of the year? They're both 3-3, both 1-2 in the conference. Would I expect them to go on some sort of run and steal the Big Ten West? No. I think it is down between those top 3, Iowa, Minnesota, and Purdue. Iowa, of course, has the clear-cut advantage, but they have yet to play Minnesota or Purdue. And again, I just mentioned, they don't have the tiebreaker over Purdue. And the way Purdue's playing right now, I mean, they're steadily rising up. They have Wisconsin. They're at Nebraska. They do have to play Michigan State, though, and they're at Ohio State, so that's going to be tough. But they end the season with Northwestern and Indiana. So Purdue has a tough schedule. Minnesota, meanwhile, they do control their own destiny. And don't forget, Minnesota did beat Purdue earlier in the year, just a couple weeks ago. So Minnesota still has to play Iowa. So right now, Purdue, who holds it over Iowa, they don't have it over Minnesota. So they would need Minnesota to falter somewhere. We could get some wacky tiebreaker scenarios as well. But Minnesota's at Northwestern. After this week, of course, they play Maryland today at home. They're at Northwestern, home against Illinois, at Iowa, at Indiana, and then they are home against Wisconsin to end the regular season. So the Big Ten West has a very tight race between those top 3. But, of course, you know, the money makers are in the Big Ten East. And we don't exactly know how it's going to shake out. Now, of course, everyone is going to say Ohio State's the favorite again, and I do think they are the favorite again. But, you know, you have 4 top 10 teams in this division, all at the top. And Penn State's the only one with a loss within the conference. You know, Ohio State has a loss, but they lost to Oregon earlier in the year. But again, they all have yet to play each other. At this point, you can consider Maryland, Indiana, and of course Rutgers out of it. Maryland's 1-2, Indiana's 0-3, and Rutgers 0-4 in conference play, respectively. The Big Ten, with an undefeated champion, just going back to our little playoff conversation of how Oklahoma's kind of shutting the door now based on their projections the rest of the year. The Big Ten would be better served to have an undefeated champion, or their one-loss champion be probably Ohio State to make their case for the playoff. Again, we are just entering the second half of the season, so it's going to be, you have to let this week and the next week, at least that first weekend of November, to play out. So when you have 4 games left, you're going to have a better determination of where this is going to shake out. Because, again, next week is where you have these huge games in the Big Ten East. Michigan versus Michigan State, and Ohio State versus Penn State. So if we could determine this right now, just assume Ohio State and Michigan win this week. If Ohio State beats Penn State next week, and then whoever wins the Michigan State game, those are your last two remaining contenders for the Big Ten East and your playoff contenders. Because you're going to have an undefeated team in Michigan or Michigan State, and you're going to have a 7-1 team in Ohio State. And I can't pick Penn State right now because of the health factor of Sean Clifford, their quarterback. I just don't know. It's too unknown right now. So you're going to have Ohio State and one of the Michigans be probably top 5 teams at this point, or top 6 teams, depending on how the other standings or how the other games shake out within the rankings. So we're in for a wild ride, folks. So buckle up. This is our warm-up week. Michigan is back this week. Michigan State is off. Ohio State has an intriguing game against Indiana this week. Penn State has Illinois. So we're warming up, folks. We're warming up for that huge end of October weekend, and then, of course, November, where everything just goes absolutely bonkers within the Big Ten and the rest of college football. All right, we're going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll start looking at some of these games for today. We'll talk about the Ed Orgeron situation as well, and we will get into our 5-pack of picks coming up later in the show. Keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Back here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu. Nick Kosko with you, of course, taking you up to 9 a.m. today as we lead you into the kickoff of Week 8 of the college football season. All right, I wanted to get this out onto the table just because, the news has simmered about it since then, because this basically happened right after Week 7 was over. And, of course, we are on the air on game days, and we basically try to look ahead to what's happening today and not what really happened throughout the week, although we do that, of course. We'd like to look back at what happened last week, of course, and lead it into our preview of today. But the big news that came out of last week that wasn't a game result was the fact that Ed Orgeron is not returning next year. Now, he was essentially fired, but he and LSU reached a separation agreement. So for some reason, and again, it's a very unique situation, rather than just firing him mid-season, they're letting him go. Okay? He's going to finish the season, but he's not coming back next year. He is going to get paid in full, though. His buyout is $17 million. He's going to get paid in full. But it's just very weird. Very, very weird. And again, based on reports, these negotiations, again, LSU was teetering with mediocrity, we'll say, heading into the year. Now, granted, post-2019, 2020, 5-5. Kind of a mess of a year. Orgeron did not surround himself with the best assistants. Obviously, the Bo Pelini situation was a disaster for his defense. But this year, there was more promise. There was promise of a return to, maybe not a return to 2019 type of season, but there was promise to be, all right, this team could win between 8 and 10 games, and all of a sudden we're talking about maybe a New Year's Six bowl game. You're going to contend with Alabama and whatnot. But they're 4-3 right now, 2-2 in the conference. Let's look at LSU's schedule. The opener to UCLA was obviously huge. Huge for both sides. Now, UCLA went up and was up and down after that, but they've kind of rebounded now. They're 5-2. But that was a bad loss. McNeese State, all right, whatever, win. Central Michigan, whatever, win. At Mississippi State, win. All right, so now you're 3-1. You're rolling now. But they also barely beat Mississippi State on the road. But it's a conference win, so it's okay. Then they play Auburn. And here's where the cracks really start opening up, and it led to this decision to come to this separation agreement. The Auburn loss at home was a bad loss. Then they go on the road at Kentucky and they get dominated. Now you're 3-3. You have 2 bad conference losses. One's a blowout. One's a game you basically should have won at home. So the decision to come to this agreement was within negotiations after the Kentucky loss and prior to their win over Florida. And sure enough, this happens and they go out and beat Florida in a shootout, 49-42. A wild game at home. And they win this game. Now they're 4-3. And remaining on their schedule, they're at Ole Miss today. They're at Alabama in 2 weeks. So they have a bye week next week. And they host Arkansas, they host Louisiana Monroe, and they host Texas A&M. So you look at the rest of the schedule, the ranked opponents ahead on their schedule, that's going to be very difficult. You could probably only see them beating Louisiana Monroe and I guess Arkansas. So the way, if you look based on how they've played this year, you're probably thinking, all right, LSU's going to finish 6-6. But that'd be a bowl game. They'd be bowl eligible. But that's not what LSU is about. Because they've won 3 national championships in this millennia with 3 different head coaches, if you're the head coach here, you should be contending for these championships year in and year out. Every single season. Orgeron's career record, by the way. So he had 8 games in 2016, 6-2. 2017, they're 9-4. 2018, they're 10-3. And then 2019, everything broke right. They put it all together. Joe Burrow has a magical year. You have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as your wide receivers. Thaddeus Moss, your tight end. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is your running back. You have a defense with Derek Stingley back there. Patrick Queen. I mean, you have an NFL roster. It's one of the greatest college football teams ever. Then the next year, a lot of those guys leave. Jamar Chase opts out, by the way. You don't have Joe Burrow as your quarterback. 5-5 last year in a mess of a year. Okay. But you might figure they're going to rebound, again, as I mentioned before, come this year and win between 8 and 10 games. I'll tell you right now, if this team beats UCLA, let's just say that loss to UCLA still sticks this year. If they had just beaten Auburn and they're 5-2 right now, I don't think we're having the same conversation. It's like, all right, you beat Auburn, quality win, and then you kind of, I don't know, you crap the bed, so to speak, next week against Kentucky. All right, that's fine. All right, bad loss, but then you come back and beat Florida. They're 5-2 right now. I don't think we're having the same conversation. Ed Orgeron has been one heck of a head coach. He really has, at least with LSU. Now, USC was in the interim role. He was 6-2 back in 2013. I know he was a disaster at Ole Miss from 05 to 07, but at LSU, when you're 49-17 overall, it's pretty darn good. But because you're teetering at 500 or just above 500 for a year plus, LSU says, it's time to go. Now, granted, there's more. There's the Title IX issues going on at the school. There are reports that he is kind of basically checked out at this point. He cared more about his off-the-field lifestyle over coaching the program once he won that 2019 national championship game, which, again, there's a bunch of reports going around of what's been going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, at a certain point, it could be very toxic. It could be very poisonous. It could be just an absolute circus back there at LSU, and it was probably the right move. But in terms of the on-the-field product, I mean, when you're playing in a division with Alabama, and I mentioned this the other week, this is back when Orgeron was considered on the hot seat. This is I forget when I said. I either said this last week or 2 weeks ago. You look at Alabama. Really, the only teams that have come out of the SEC as champions are Bama, Georgia, and LSU. Majority, and this is just off the top of my head. The fact that LSU has been that successful with the way Alabama's run, and I'm not saying use Nick Saban as an excuse, because if you're at LSU or you're at Texas A&M, you should have the capabilities of beating Alabama, even though they're basically a juggernaut. But the reality is, Alabama is a juggernaut. So if you manage to win an SEC title or even a national championship in between like maybe 4 or 5 years of Alabama running through the SEC, I don't know, that's pretty darn good. If you could upset them once in a while and win between 8 and 10 games a year, I would say it's pretty darn good for your program. And you have the occasional year where, again, 15-0, win a national championship game, absolutely. I would take that year. I mean, that should have bought them the next 4 years. But again, the recruiting is, I guess, kind of there. But his surrounding cast, his supporting cast, Orgeron's, was not there. And I think that was his biggest downfall. I think that was the biggest reasoning for LSU to make this move now. But because Orgeron is a beloved Louisiana native, because he brought this school a national title just less than 2 years ago, that might have inclined him to say, look, it's hard for us to fire you right now with great cause on the football field. Because again, it would look very weird, wouldn't it? I know the negotiations were going on behind the scenes before the Florida win, but wouldn't it look very weird for optics wise if they're coming off this upset win over Florida at home in a shootout, and it's very exciting and whatnot, and they're going to go into Ole Miss week and okay, it's gonna things are trending up again for LSU. Wouldn't it look very weird if they're like, yeah, LSU just fired Ed Orgeron, but no, they came to a separation agreement. It's like a delayed divorce. Why would you want that? Just cut the cord. It's like the lawyers and the legal teams have to take precedent now at this point. So he's going to coach out the rest of the year. And wouldn't it be funny if they upset Ole Miss today? Upset Ole Miss, and they're not going to beat Alabama. But let's just say, for argument's sake, out of their last 5 games, they win 4 of them, and they're 8-4 before they go to a bowl game. Can you imagine? And I'm not going to rule that out. And believe me, LSU is not that great of a team, but you saw the run game last week. When Max Johnson plays well, he plays well. But you saw Davis Price, the running back last week, set the LSU single game record. I mean, now all of a sudden you have a running game. Can you imagine if they actually won 4 of their last 5? Upsetting Ole Miss, upsetting Texas A&M at the end of the year. Oh my goodness gracious. He would go out with a smile. Now, again, he wouldn't be happy he's leaving his coaching position, but hey, he's going to go into 2022 off on a positive note on the field at least, and he's going to go out with $17 million, and he doesn't have to do a damn thing next year. In fact, now I'm rooting for that. I kind of want to see that now, just to see the headlines explode here. Wouldn't that be great? Now, granted, I don't think they're going to win today. I don't think they're going to beat Ole Miss in Ole Miss. I don't think they're going to beat Alabama. They might beat Arkansas and Louisiana Monroe. So there's 6 wins right there. Texas A&M, they're at home, so maybe. Zach Calzada was the reason why I was down on Texas A&M, but he's picked it up now, so who knows if he remains the quarterback or they actually get Haynes King back in there. So again, this team probably tops out at 6 wins, but there's totally a path for 8 wins before a bowl game. And what if whatever bowl game they get, if they go 9-4 and finish the season with a bowl game or victory, and they're 9-4? I mean, my goodness gracious. Oh yeah, but Orgeron's leaving. Last 3 years, national championship 15-0, 5-5 during a COVID year, 9-4 bowl victory. He's gone. Goodbye. See you, Ed. Nice to have you. Thanks for the thanks for the national championship. Then let's just say he's 9-4. He goes 5-1 in the next 6 games. I'm just throwing hypotheticals here, people. His career record at LSU, get this, would be 54-18. You tell me, you're telling me you're going to fire that man? 54-18. If Greg Schiano was 54-18 through 6 years at Rutgers in his second stint in the Big Ten, I would build 5 statues of him tomorrow. 5 statues. Put them all out. Sprinkle one for each campus. One for the College Ave campus, one for the Bush campus, one for the Livingston, Cook Douglas, and even rename the stadium after Schiano. I promise I wasn't going to bring up Rutgers today, but I mean, when you put that in perspective, it's absurd. And again, I know it's LSU, it's the SEC, it's the SEC West. To be more specific, you expect national championships, and you expect your program in house to have you have your house in order. You don't have this off the field mess. I get it. It's probably time to move on. At least in their minds. I still don't quite understand it from an on the field perspective. I would have given them to the end of the year and then make your decision. But hey, they get a jump start on the. Frankly, I would have given them to the end of the year unless it was a total disaster. I would have given them this year and then give them the start of next year if you're really going to be that. If you're going to be that high pressure about the situation. But hey, they get a jump start on the coaching search. We know they're into Mel Tucker. Jimbo Fisher's name was thrown out there, but I don't think he's going to leave Texas A&M. But it just seems like Penn State's James Franklin and Michigan State's Mel Tucker are the two top guys. I'm sure they'll look at Luke Fickell based on what he's done at Cincinnati. But, I mean, it's just wild, folks. Just absolutely wild. I'll give you a list, and there are many lists, and this is from Pete Thamel, by the way, from Yahoo Sports. So he has Tucker and James Franklin as his top two. Actually, Fickell's his third candidate as well. The other ones, how about taking Bob Stoops out of retirement, former Oklahoma head coach? Lane Kiffin's been a very popular name being thrown around for this job because, again, it's the revival of the Lane train. We know he was a disaster before he went to Alabama, and then when he goes to Alabama, revives his career. Coaches FAU, solid program, and then he comes to Ole Miss, and the way they're playing right now, I mean, he could parlay that into to a bigger job, but who knows if he leaves within the division. But Lane Kiffin is going to be definitely looked at. Billy Napier, coaches for Louisiana right now. Hey, keep local boy. He's the Louisiana coach right now. Why not upgrade him to LSU? He's going to be a popular candidate. And they also he threw out Mario Cristobal, Oregon's head coach. Now, again, I think Oregon would do whatever they possibly could to pay him out the rear end to keep him in Oregon. I don't think he would come down to LSU. I think he would stay at Oregon. They would entice him too much. Plus, they're still a top 10 team right now. There was also a mention of two former LSU coordinators. Dave Aranda, their former defensive coordinator on that national championship team. He's the head coach of Baylor right now, so I don't know if he would jump back into the SEC. I mean, don't get me wrong. LSU is the much better job than Baylor, but the way he has him right now, I think he's comfortable right now with Baylor. They're a rising program. Joe Brady, this would be interesting. He left LSU to go to the NFL. He's the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. So being the head coach at LSU is obviously bigger than being the offensive coordinator for an NFL team, despite the fact that it's the NFL. If Brady got promoted to a head coaching position, then yes, I mean, it'd be hard for him to jump from being a head coach of an NFL team going down to LSU. It just depends on where your loyalties lie and obviously what you prefer in terms of being a head coach and running a program or running a franchise. So, I mean, to me, I would rule out the former coordinators, but Billy Napier is going to be up there, Fickell's going to be up there, and then Franklin and Tucker. Those are your four guys that are going to be really sought after for this position. But hey, they can get a head start. They can start talking to these guys, or they can start, laying the groundwork for these guys. So from that perspective, it wasn't the worst move. But again, I don't totally understand it from the LSU perspective. Aside, if you're just going to use the off the field transgressions as the reason why, then okay, it's a valid reason. But as far as the football program on the field, again, they blew it against Auburn. Did not look good against Kentucky, and of course, the season opening loss to UCLA was not good either. But hey, it happens. You want to be perfect? You want 15-0 seasons every year? All right, more power to you. See if you can beat out Alabama, a rising Ole Miss program, and Texas A&M. Heck, Arkansas has had their moments this year. It's tough. You're in one of the most loaded, if not the most loaded division in college football. But hey, you keep expecting 15-0 seasons every year. More power to you. More power to you. By the way, LSU does play Ole Miss today. In case you forgot. So Orgeron goes back to his old stomping grounds. I don't expect them to win today. But boy, would that be funny. Oh, man. Wouldn't that be absolutely glorious if Ole Miss gets upset by LSU today on the heels of this news today. Or from last week, I should say. It's 3:30 today. Ole Miss is an 8-point favorite. Obviously expected to be a shootout like LSU Florida last week. Total is set at 76.5. I don't know if I would take the over. Do I expect another 49-42 game? Not necessarily. This is not one of the games on our 5-pack of picks this week, but boy, would I be inclined to maybe throw some shekels on LSU to cover today. +8 on the road, off this, where now there's no pressure on. Folks, there is literally no pressure. Think about it this way, from a betting perspective over the next 5 games for LSU. There's no more pressure on Ed Orgeron. He's gone. He's going to get his money. So what the heck? They're either going to they're either going to throw in the towel, or they're going to play out of their minds at this point. There's no in between. There's no more pressure on Coach O. None. He's gone. He's gone. He's just, again, I mentioned before the divorce analogy. It's like he has to wait till a certain date till he can finally move out of the house. The agreement's literally in place. They're separated. But it's like the wife went away and he's still in the house. And now he has to look up, pack up, sell the place, and go somewhere else for the next year. But with $17 million. Ain't life grand. All right, we're going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll dive into our 5 picks this week with our 5 games. 24-11 on the year, 2-3 last week. Bad week for us based on our 2021 standards. But we'll see if we can rebound here in Week 8 as we hit the second half of the college football season. Don't go away. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Final segment of the show here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Nick Kosko with you leading up to 9 a.m. today. Of course, we are always presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Just celebrated our 2-year anniversary over at Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, fastest growing jiu-jitsu and MMA school in South Jersey. Be sure to check it out. I know I do with my year plus of training already. A great environment. If you need, if you want to try it out or looking to switch schools, be sure to check them out. Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, Tillis Gym, Egg Harbor Township. Find them on Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on Instagram and Facebook as well. You can also go to harborjiujitsu.com. All right, 5-pack of picks as we roll on here. 24-11 on the year. And boy, was I mad about last week where it just didn't happen for us. It didn't. It did not happen for us. 2-3, some bad judgments. Too high on my own Scarlet Knights, and then I don't know. The picks last week, I went against my better judgments. This week, I had a clearer head going into this week, so we'll start out here with Oklahoma State at Iowa State, and this one is very surprising to me. The fact that Iowa State is a 7-point favorite at home. 7-point favorite at home against the number 8 team in the country. What? Now, granted, I know Iowa State was a popular preseason pick to steal the Big 12 this year, maybe be a dark horse playoff contender, but they're 4-2. Breece Hall's playing well. Brock Purdy's kind of stepped it up now, but does Vegas know something that I don't know? Oklahoma State, top 10 team. Now, conference opponent. I could see them being a road dog, but a full touchdown? Full touchdown. And this is after 3 straight wins where they've beaten top 25 opponents. All Big 12 opponents, by the way. Previously ranked Kansas State. They beat Baylor. They beat Texas. All in a row. Last 3 games. Oklahoma State scheduled the rest of the way. At Iowa State here. Home against Kansas. At West Virginia. Home against TCU. At Texas Tech. And, of course, home against Oklahoma. But they're 7-point dogs today? That's very interesting. Vegas might know something I don't know. But that's fine. Totally fine. We're taking Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State +7 at Iowa State. Oregon at UCLA. Very interesting, the fact that Oregon's a 10-point... Sorry, they're the number 10 team in the country. They're still a road dog. You figured they'd be a road favorite. I know UCLA has stepped it up now. This would be a very interesting Pac-12 championship matchup, and this is I think a lot of people started anticipating this, especially after UCLA's win over LSU earlier in the year. So we could very well see this game again. But the fact that even Oregon, despite UCLA picking it back up and they're 5-2 now, why Oregon is a road dog is beyond me. Now, if they were a favorite, okay, I could see them being a 3-point favorite at most. But the way it shakes out right now, Oregon is tied with Oregon State at the top of their division, right? In the Pac-12 South, UCLA is 3-1, tied with Arizona State, while Utah is 3-0 in the conference. UCLA's only loss this year came to Fresno State. That's their second. That was their first loss of the year. Fresno State out of the conference. They did lose to Arizona State, so they don't have that tiebreaker. But they have yet to play Utah. They could totally rebound. Now, again, they would probably have to beat Oregon today and then basically run the table here and hope Arizona State falters as well to make the Pac-12 championship game and to hopefully get a rematch with Oregon. But it's still possible. Could see this in the Pac-12 championship game. But the fact that Oregon, again, is a 1-point dog, basically a pick 'em on the road. So that's why we're going to roll with Oregon. Oregon's still the number 10 team in the country. Still trust them. They're probably going to still make the Pac-12 championship game. They'll probably win the Pac-12 again. Not going to make the playoff in my mind, but they are still there. They're still the cream of the crop when it comes to the Pac-12 conference. So Oregon +1 at UCLA today. Later this afternoon, the game's at 3:30. Clemson at Pitt. Oh boy, Pitt's only a 3.5-point favorite at home, and you know where we're going with that. I at this point, I don't trust Clemson. They're going to win a few more games this year, but I mean, they're also going to lose a couple more games this year, and I think this is going to be one of them. Pittsburgh is very, very good, and they shut me up last week. I had Virginia Tech +5 last week against Pittsburgh at home, and Pittsburgh just said, that's funny, that's cute, we're going to dominate this game. Sure enough, they did, and they're less than a 4-point favorite against Clemson at home, but they were a 5-point favorite on the road against Virginia Tech, which kind of doesn't make sense to me, but okay, because Clemson, despite the fact that they have struggled, they still have the talent, but Kenny Pickett is absolutely ridiculous. He's got nearly 2,000 yards passing. He's got 21 touchdown passes. Jordan Addison, great receiver, almost 600 yards. He's got nine of those 21 touchdowns. I just think Pittsburgh's offense is just too good right now. I don't think Clemson can keep up. They have too many injuries. DJ Uiagalelei has also been struggling this year, coming in for Trevor Lawrence after he left after last season. So Pittsburgh, too much firepower for me. They're at home. Give me them -3.5. Wisconsin at Purdue. Interesting game in the Big Ten. Purdue is a home dog, by the way, and they just appeared in the top 25. They're coming off the upset win over Iowa, and yet the way Wisconsin has struggled this year, particularly on offense with quarterback Graham Mertz, I still find it hard to believe that Purdue would be a home dog to this Wisconsin team. It's a shell of itself of what they should have been, and I only have myself to blame because I was high on Graham Mertz. I was high on Wisconsin winning the Big Ten West. I figured there was going to be a nice, maybe 9 to 10 win season for this team. I was dead wrong. Dead wrong on Mertz at least. Wisconsin could still get it together over the last 6 games and finish 8-4, but I don't trust them at all. And the fact that Purdue's a home dog doesn't sit well with me, so we're taking the Boilermakers. I don't think they're going to come off they're not going to come off an emotional high after beating Iowa from last week. They're back at home. That's fine. Aiden O'Connell's playing very well. He seems to be the guy now at quarterback. And don't forget, you have David Bell. David Bell is a giant killer. David Bell's a heck of a receiver. Could be better than Rondale Moore, who is now a rookie for the Cardinals coming out of Purdue. But how do you trust Wisconsin? I don't trust Wisconsin one bit. You mean to tell me if Aiden O'Connell and David Bell start getting it going on offense, Graham Mertz is going to get the Wisconsin offense going in the passing game? Absolutely not. Don't trust it at all. Give me Purdue +3.5 at home over Wisconsin. And my final game, Ohio State at Indiana. Now, I usually don't take these huge games. I tried one, 2 weeks ago? We tried Maryland +21 at Ohio State, and Ohio State just absolutely floored them by 40. This one, I'm leaning towards Ohio State in the 3-touchdown favorite department here. They're at Indiana, so it's a little bit different. They're on the road, but Indiana, no good. This game was great on paper coming into the year because of the implications from last year. Indiana's only loss in the regular season was to Ohio State, and of course, everyone knows Ohio State couldn't play their final game, but they got the Big Ten championship nod anyway, because they had the head-to-head over Indiana despite not playing the 6-game threshold. Look, I get all that, but this game this year is such a mismatch on paper. Jack Tuttle's the new quarterback for Indiana due to the injury to Michael Penix Jr. To me, there's just no chance. There's just no chance they keep this close. And I think Ohio State, with the way they've kind of warmed up against the lesser Big Ten opponents since C.J. Stroud's injury, and he's come back in now. He's blazing hot, and he's on his way to being a Heisman contender. The way he's playing right now, 18 touchdowns, 1,700 yards. Good luck stopping Trevion Henderson out of the backfield, and also you have Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, among others, in that receiving core. Good luck, Indiana. It's not happening. I will take Ohio State in an absolute blowout today at -21. All right, so quick recap. We have Oklahoma State +7 at Iowa State, Oregon +1 at UCLA, Pittsburgh -3.5 versus Clemson, Purdue +3.5 versus Wisconsin, and we have Ohio State -21 at Indiana. So that's our 5-pack of picks today. Let's see if we can get back to a 5-0 week. Let's rebound here in Week 8 as we hit the second half of the college football season. Enjoy the games today, folks. We'll talk to you next week as we start hitting the gauntlet of all these schedules coming up in this epic 2021 season. You've been listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.